and welcome back to Building You with Salome Rue. If it's your first time to visit this channel, thank you very much for joining. I'm Salome, and on this channel, we focus on discussing all things personal improvement, but in the focus of managing personal finances so we can grow our finances, protect them, but most importantly, enhance our earning capacity. So, what are those habits that we need to change? So, in today's video, it's really just a discussion that is to do with the concept of credit. And you'll see I've titled it something a little bit controversial, right? Which is to say, you don't need credit. Well, that's not my sentiment. It's purely something I discovered a group of people believe very strongly, and they have their personal reasons for stating that. And we just want to explore that line of thinking, see whether we agree with it or not, and obviously look at the other side of the coins. There is always two sides to a coin, so hey, let's see what that turns out to be like. So if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do. Just click the subscribe button and you'll be able to see a bell that's on there. Click that again and you'll always receive a notification when there's a next video, and you'll also help to grow my channel. I thank you for your kindness. So with this topic about, do we need credit or not, or the statement you don't need credit, I'll tell you the premise of this. So the view is that it's easy to qualify for debt. Easy to qualify for debt. However, it is a lot harder to get out of the debt. Okay, so for most people, you may feel like getting access to credit is your lifesaver. Fine, if you want to get like a mortgage or something very, very important, then obviously that is actually something quite crucial. But let's really ask ourselves, has everything we've ever acquired on credit been necessary? And this is where the argument comes in. The argument says that credit is not your money. If you want to buy something important, you should save for that and use that money that you've saved to then buy the item. Okay, now the same people that say this also argue that credit companies exist solely to exploit people who've got the incapacity to save money for themselves or live within their means. And these are the same people that need support to have this desire to sort of live a life that appears to be much wealthier than they are, or they're trying to fit into a certain status quo within society to show that they can purchase items which in reality they cannot afford. Now, how does that make you feel? Do you think it's correct to say that the credit system has been exploited? It's been normalized to a point that people are sucked into unnecessary debt to a huge extent? Well, that is the argument of the tagline, you don't need credit. We also know, I guess, on the other hand, that it is critical to say that there are situations where we'll always need debt for one thing or another. Even huge businesses that are out there, when you look at their accounts, they actually have a certain amount of credit that is showing there, as well as something that shows what's bringing in their profit and how much they're making in revenue. And that brings a good balance to the books. And the same, I guess, applies to us as individuals. And for some people, they're desiring to be debt-free altogether, and that's absolutely fine. That's actually something I'm up for and I support wholly. And we just want to explore this argument of you don't need credit. Now, I believe that there are certain aspects of debt that you will probably need which are justifiable. Okay, and these are things like starting from education loans, for example. You want to go to university to do a certain degree, or you want to improve yourself in one way or another. It is arguable that that kind of debt that you could have access to help you fund your education is actually valuable, because you are increasing your value as a person and you're investing in your future with the anticipation that you get career opportunities which will be able to repay that. Okay, so I think that's perfectly fine to understand that credit in those circumstances is justifiable. The other thing is the home loans, okay, to do with our mortgages, right? How many people can really afford 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 pounds to buy a property? Okay, again, you will need to get a mortgage for that in most cases. And that is a justifiable reason, because when you're purchasing a home, at the end of the day, the home ownership provides you with stability and the potential to actually grow an investment that increases in value, as well as you building up some equity for yourself. Okay, so the argument, sorry, to say that, credit is bad completely, then doesn't really become validated in that kind of situation. You also have individuals who are starting businesses, okay? Most people who want to start a business, whether small or large, need access to credit in the first instance. they're borrowing that on the basis that it's probably the capital that they need, or it's expansion reasons, right? And the amount of money that they're borrowing, it's probably going to come at a level of interest they have to pay. And the argument then becomes whatever they're going to generate from the business will be able to repay that, and the equation balances and everybody's happy and everybody's profitable, right? The same applies to people that will borrow to make other investments, which could be, expanding real estate, or it could be, buying stocks. Well, I don't really agree with buying stocks on credit, but that's an argument for another day. But whatever it is that you want to do, that is a business project or an investment in particular, you borrowing to do that, as long as the level of interest you're getting is reasonable, it would be justifiable, because the investment should ideally outweigh the cost of the credit. Now, there is an element of risk in that, as we would all agree, because sometimes you could do that and that formula doesn't work for you, and you end up being stuck again, and it becomes a vicious cycle. Such is life, but hey, we have to consider the reality of these things. So I guess that's the good side, that really then says, look, you can't totally say that you do not need credit, because in certain circumstances you will need it. Now let's look at aspects that would be for the argument to say you do not need credit, okay? And this is particularly when it comes to high interest credit card debt. Now, this has been crucified to be, in as much as it can become a lifesaver in some instances, most people have ended up accumulating credit on high interest rates, right? Without really having the ability to pay the balance in full. And this creates a bad debt situation, or a cycle of debt. And it can lead to high interest, financial stress. You become affected probably by negative credit scores if you're not able to pay up, or if your credit is building up on an ongoing basis, which is not manageable. These things do happen. And the key point is the interest rate. I'll give an example. When I was in my early 20s and I got my first credit card, I was like, oh my goodness, I have a credit card finally. And it was just one of those experiences where I knew that if I'm stuck, I can always go to my credit card, swipe it, I've got what I need for free. Well, of course not for free, because I then have to pay back the money. But when I saw the statement come through, all they were asking for was a minimum payment of less than £10. I was like, oh, I can do this. This is easy, right? But over time, I then realized that, hold on, what they're talking about on the statement is just a minimum payment, which doesn't cover the full amount I've actually already spent. And before I knew it, I didn't realize I was actually on a road of digging myself into debt that I could have avoided, but it was simply because the access to the credit made it seem like this money was available to me. I knew I had to pay it back, but I didn't look at the cost of it. I didn't look at how much it was actually costing me, and how difficult it could get to actually repay that if I'm not managing it appropriately. Obviously, time has passed now. We're a little bit older and a little bit wiser. So, hey, I'm sure you can probably relate to stories like that. But that's just to give you an example. When it comes to high interest rate credit cards, really, you need to make sure that you are asking yourself whether you need to be getting into that debt. You've got also payday loans. Now, I don't know whether this is common in most other countries, but we definitely have them here in the UK, where you can go to a money shop, or you can go to an online service that provides payday loans. And normally the idea is that you apply for this payday loan, you get this money, but it comes at a huge cost. And the idea is when you then get paid, you're paying it back. But really and truly speaking, these sort of loans don't come on good terms, and they also have very short payment periods. And relying on payday loan really just indicates that you are in financial distress, and it can also turn into a huge debt trap. Okay, so something like that you want to avoid as much as possible. It obviously exists for a reason, to really help people out in desperate situations, but it should probably be a last resort. Okay, we then have the aspect of making purchases, especially luxury purchases or impulse purchases, right, on credit. So you're taking a debt for non-essential items like going on an expensive holiday, or you're buying luxury goods, or you're just buying unnecessary consumer items. I mean, sometimes we can justify ourselves in the moment, and we can relieve, some form of desire within that point in time. But is it really something that's worth getting into debt for? Because remember, some of these purchases don't have any long-term value for you, and they're not going to generate you any income, right? You're literally just consuming an enjoyment for that moment, and then what next? Right? So we really need to see whether the argument of getting into credit is worth it in those circumstances. Okay, and I'm sure while you're watching or listening to this, you can think of examples where you've probably seen this happen with other people, or you've gone through that journey yourself. always make sure that you try and avoid, spending luxury expenditure or impulse purchases on credit unless you know that you can pay off the balances immediately after. Okay, another good one which we probably deal with on a regular basis is to do with car loans. Now, I'm not against car loans entirely, but where it becomes a problem is you're getting vehicles that are considered to be a bad debt, in the sense that you're taking a loan for a vehicle that is beyond your earning capacity or beyond your means of affordability, right? And this can result in you falling sometimes into unfavorable loan terms. So let's say, I don't know, it's got long repayment attached to it, or it's got a high level of interest, right? And so the loans can apply whether it's with the bank or it's with, you using a credit facility to purchase the car. You just need to make sure that you're not falling for excessive monthly payments that could become a strain to your budget. Okay. I don't know if I've shared this before, but when I had my very first car on a car loan, I was so excited that I qualified to get this car. And I was actually very excited also that I didn't need to pay a deposit at all. It was like, you can take this car and literally walk away with it, and it's yours as long as you can afford to pay this money. And I thought, oh, great, I can afford to pay that. That's not a problem. But in retrospect later, when I then looked at the numbers, I realized that actually I've paid so much in interest, right? I've paid so much in interest. And the value of the car, by the time I'm selling it, it just doesn't add up. So I've probably told the story before, but I just need to throw that in there to say we really need to be extra careful, especially if you are a young person who's starting, your world of employment, or, you're starting to build your own life and you've got access to all these things. We really, really need to make sure that we're extra careful and we understand the terms that we're getting ourselves attached to. So I guess the classification of whether debt is good or not really will not be an absolute truth for everyone, because everyone's situation is different and every individual circumstances are different and financial goals are also different. What could be a bad debt for somebody else might be a good debt in another person's situation. But I think the key thing is, in as much as we want to say that, oh, you do not need credit, that's not me saying that, but I'm just saying that just look at the level of interest that you're committing yourself to. Just try and avoid as much as possible high interest credit, and try and keep those kind of debts, as low as possible, right? Anything you accumulate, try and pay it off as quickly as you can, because you really want to make sure that you are becoming financially free from the burden of debt that you're carrying that is expensive for you. Okay, try and build an emergency fund as much as possible. That's simply having 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. It's not an easy thing to do. I know for most people, especially in the current economy, we're probably living hand to mouth, and some people, could be struggling financially. It's understandable, but it's desirable that if you do have an emergency fund, you've got something to fall back on that then prevents you from utilizing these expensive credit lines, which you can end up finding yourself tangled with. Okay, now also remember your psychological and emotional balance with these things. I mean, I think it is normal for many people to feel distressed the more debt that they're carrying, and it's better for you to have a strategy that gives you peace of mind and be on a journey to become debt free as much as possible, even if it means prioritizing debt repayment over other financial goals, right? I know everybody's situation is different, but you need to really, really look at this and make sure that there is a plan in place to minimize the amount of debt and the charges that are being placed on that debt for you. So let's look at evaluating our personal situations and also considering our long-term financial goals. Do we know what they are? What do we intend to do? Do we need to speak to a debt counselor, right? Do we need some help from someone who's able to steer us in the right direction based on our circumstances? So I hope you found this helpful, but ultimately just bear in mind, none of my videos constitute as financial advice. So really, the content is for education purposes only. So you can take this away, compare notes, look at your situation and speak to someone who's accredited and certified by the Financial Conduct Authority within your jurisdiction. And hopefully you can be on a journey to improve your circumstances if that is something that is applicable in your situation. So thanks for tuning in, and do come back for the next video. There will be a part 2 where we follow on this subject, and I won't want you to miss that. And yeah, keep well and stay blessed. I look forward to seeing you. Bye.